Mobile Bay has one of the most interesting histories of any body of water in the United States, or the world for that matter. Just a few decades after Columbus discovered the New World, Vasco Pineda came up Mobile Bay around 1520. And he had a caravel, which means he was able to guide himself into the bay, follow the deep water channel, heaving what's called the lead line, so he could stay in water deep enough because there were lots and lots of sandbars in Mobile Bay at that point. I did a painting that is of the Spanish coming for the first time close enough to have visual contact with both the shore and them, with the people on board. And Pineda was, unlike a lot of Spanish explorers, he was a very benign explorer. He brought trinkets and gifts and things to be able to interact with the people. The problem was, one of the things they brought that interacted with the people was smallpox, which the Europeans largely recovered from when they got it, but for the Native Americans over the years, they had absolutely no immunities whatsoever. And it is predicted that 95% of Native American cultures died of smallpox and these other diseases that the Europeans brought in. When my ancestors landed at Plymouth Rock on the Mayflower, had the local Indians been 20 times as many as they were before, I don't think they'd allowed the Pilgrims to land. But their population had been so decimated that they allowed the Pilgrims to come in. So it was much the same thing here. These people were curious, but we left a terrible decimation of their culture when the Spanish left. But the Spanish came in and had some settlements. Then De Soto came here about 20 years later. And De Soto, of course, came in at Florida and just cut a swath of destruction up through Florida into the Carolinas and then back down. And then north of here, he was met because the reputation of his army as being so destructive had gotten well ahead of his army. So a chieftain by the name of Tuscaloosa set up, brought a huge mass of his natives together, about 7,000 or so of them, to meet De Soto's heavy armor and European steel. And they clashed at the Battle of Mobila, which was north of Mobile, probably about 40 miles. And that was a legendary battle. But Tuscaloosa did not defeat the Spanish, but he broke them as a fighting force. And De Soto's original 600 men dwindled down to about 20. And he died as they were pushing across the Mississippi River. And only a few of his men survived. And that put the Spanish off coming here for a while. And then later on, the French came in and established a series of Fort Louis north of Mobile. And that was a kind of a pestilential swamp, and they had problems with that. So in about 1711, they moved down to the site of the present Mobile, and they named Mobile after Mobila, this legendary battle that they had heard about that had taken place in that area. So that's how Mobile was named, was for the village of Mobila and where the battle was took place. Then the French were here for a number of years, and then the British came in, and then the Americans came in. And so that evolved up with all of the different cultural descendants and things that were in Mobile and the whole area around here was a polyglot. There was an awful lot of intermarriage with the natives in the area. It was mostly an agrarian culture. And then later Mobile set up as a deep water port because the Mobile River goes by, and then you have a nice channel that goes out into the Gulf of Mexico. And then about in the 1830s and 1840s, to prevent the Spanish, French, or British from ever invading which there was a danger of that, as we found out in the War of 1812. Fort Morgan was built because it was by the deep water access on the eastern side of Mobile Bay at the mouth. And then they built Fort Gaines on the western side, and that is a much smaller fort because the channel there is not as deep as the deep water channel, but it would, if somebody tried to flank in their gunboats or such, they could go by Fort Gaines, but it was big enough to stop that. Fort Morgan is the gigantic fort that's about 600 feet across, and extremely well fortified. And the Confederates took over this federal fort when the Civil War was declared. And so they then manned that with a huge garrison down there to keep out the Federals. Admiral Farragut, who was born in the South but was in the Northern Navy and loyal to the North, Lincoln liked him and put him in charge of the Gulf Coast blockading squadron. And the first thing that Farragut did was went and took the city of New Orleans. People don't realize that there was a large tendency in Britain to side with the Confederacy because they wanted the cotton for their mills. The French also, in fact, the Southern cotton supplied a tremendous number of mills all through Europe, as well as America and the Northeast. But Farragut, once he took New Orleans, started to take over the Mississippi River, and he wanted to come back after he took New Orleans to take Mobile, which he felt was incredibly important to take Mobile. It was one of the last deep water ports on the Gulf. So then, but he was told he was to go up to take Vicksburg, which he took in July of 1863. Then he set his sights on taking Mobile. And he came back out, and by August of 1864, he had amassed the fleet that he needed to attack and take Mobile Bay. But the Confederates were ready for him. But on the morning of August 5th, 1864, he made his attack on Fort Morgan and came up with his ironclads and his vessels and ran into a lot of problems. The Tecumseh, one of the giant Union ironclads, hit one of the mines or torpedoes that were in the bay and sank in very short order, taking 91 men to their deaths. And it's still there, entombed just off the fort. But Farragut ran into a problem, and he decided he had to go through the torpedo field, which was really a minefield. And when somebody objected to that, he said, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead," which has come down to us. But that was uttered at about 7:45 a.m., August 5th, 1864. And of course, Farragut did take Mobile, and then the Federals came in and came up the eastern shore, and there was a large battle at Blakely. They couldn't take Mobile from the western side, so they took it from the eastern side, near Spanish Fort. But Blakely was the last large land battle fought in the Civil War, which was 20,000 Union troops attacking about 5,000 Confederate troops. Then Mobile fell to the Union. The Union went over into Mobile and occupied Mobile. Now, Mardi Gras had never really been celebrated, but that's when Mardi Gras really took off, because people could dress up in costumes and taunt their aggressors. And so you had people who and that, if you can believe, masks and robes used to taunt troops, it's about the same time the Ku Klux Klan was getting started after the Civil War. And so that's one of the reasons Mobile developed in that manner.